Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dawn of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 23, The Dispute. So in this chapter we actually get Yangchen going to the Phoenix Eel spirits and trying to have this second negotiation with them. But obviously she finds out that they are infuriated, enraged, they're on the verge of becoming dark spirits at this point. They're not quite at that point, but they are not going to be reasonable in this discussion. And so how does Yangchen come to an agreement with spirits who are unwilling to make any sort of a deal unless the Saowon clan is like heavily punished for breaking the first deal? And that's what this whole chapter is about. So let's get into this one. A lot to go through here. So she leaves Nujian, her bison, behind because it says he's jittery around spirits these days after the old iron incidents. So she heads down there with just her glider, and the first thing that really happens here is that it's noted that a lot of the animals in the area are drawn to her, and we find out that Yangchen seems to have this thing where just in general animals are heavily drawn to her. This is why she has 3 animals. She obviously has her sky bison, who, you know, she got to pick one anyway because she's an air nomad. But it is noted that the other children had cried on bonding day when most of the bison calves flocked to Yangchen instead of distributing themselves equally among the other children. So she had to flee with Nujian before she ended up with a whole herd of companions instead of just one. So that's a fun little moment of like she just picks one and leaves to allow the others to actually get some bison. But this is also why she has pick and pack. They were just drawn to her. And all these squirrel, toads, monkey, marmots are drawn to her as well. So she has to sort of like, you know, shoo them away as she makes her way to the area where the phoenix eels are, which involves her finding the area, the boundary zone. This is the whole problem with this, of like, the phoenix eels effectively live in a certain area, and they claim a certain area surrounding that as being like theirs, like spiritual land. You can't do anything to this, and that's what was violated. But what she finds out here is that she was sort of lied to, or the way she interprets it is that like the chain of communication about what way it was broken, there was a lot of lies along the way. So she was told that the breach was that they started to farm in the boundary area, and it was only a little bit. So they're trying to frame it as like the spirits are being unreasonable for the breach because they just want to farm a little bit more. But when she gets there, she finds that no, like there was a full-on like construction projects going on here. This was an excavation zone. They were like basically doing mining here with like heavy machinery. In terms of like there was like drills there to get through the hard ground, and you can see why that would be hugely disturbing to the spirits. Like that would infuriate them in this way to the point where the spirits, you know, want revenge for this. The punishment might not have been as strong if it maybe was just a little bit of farming, though as we go on we sort of find out that realistically any breach, regardless of how minor it was, the spirits probably would have treated it the same way. So she still views it as being a little bit of like, okay, you know, the Saowon clan trying to like hide the extent to which they broke this. They actually went way past what they were allowed to do. But anyway, she just notes that like this is very different than what the spirits even did in the first place. Like they have full on like destroyed like sections of like the, you know, buildings that have been made. The equipment there has been full on destroyed, whereas what they did in the first place was described as, you know, they had snapped the piles of encroaching settlements, flooded portions of fields, and carried off heads of livestock. Their sole intent was to warn humans off portions of Ma'inka. Their actions almost mischievous. Negotiating with them was still possible. So that's what happened like in the first place. And now you can see they've been enraged and are actually like damaging much more stuff. So she basically has to from then make her way through this area and it sort of transitions from being full on like physical world to being a little bit more like spirit viney, almost like she's making a transition into the spirit world for her to arrive at the cenote where they are. So she arrives there at the tunnel where they are, and they immediately are like, little egg. That's what the phoenix eels refer to her as, and we'll get more on that name in just a second. Just before she finds the phoenix eels, there is one interesting bit that it's just kind of like surprisingly ominous, but they just leave it there. Off to her left stalked a presence, a shadow out of the corner of her eye, long-limbed and muscled like a puma goat. It was at least 20 feet tall. She dared not look at it directly, and slowed down to let it cross her path. Once it had gone, she saw giant handprints left behind, shaped like a human's, down to the palm lines. I'm kind of like, what's that meant to be? Is that a physical animal, or is that like a spirit that we're referring to here? Or is it meant to be just something similar to a puma goat? So is it meant to be the gorilla? Is this meant to be like a gorilla goat like Flopsy? Because that sort of would maybe match that description to a certain degree, as like a more big, monstrous looking animal that maybe she's not familiar with. They never come back to it. It's just there's another creature around the area where the phoenix eels are. But interesting. So she wants to get them to talk, and she's very respectful because she knows she's going into this second negotiation in a bad spot, because effectively the humans broke the first deal, and they are going to view it as that being the Avatar broke the deal. So she has to sort of concede ground to them in the negotiation, because they're not going to be reasonable with this. And that's what we get. They feel betrayed, and it says here, spirits were not humans who could watch an act of bad faith and figured they would get theirs back in the future. They were sharpened rails, signs before the cliff drop, harsh tutors who swatted your hand the moment your brushstroke swayed. Parents always forgot the lessons they told their own children. So just getting across the idea that if they have a deal, it is an exact deal. No matter what way it is broken, they view it as a full-on betrayal of those terms. There's no logical, reasonable interpretation here. Terms have been broken. We're done. That's how bad things are here. They refer to her here as a hollow shell, little egg with no yolk inside. We know why you are here. Now, this is an interesting one. It's never really described. They just refer to her as little egg a few times. And why is that? Is this just a spirit referring to like an avatar as a shell because it's a combination human spirit, and so the human that they are talking to is just like a shell for Rava? Or is it more specific to Yangchen, that Yangchen is a shell with nothing inside because she's struggling with her own memories, and that she's like half memories of past avatars, and she's struggling with her own, something like that. It's an interesting one to consider. And yeah, she's trying to start the negotiation, but she knows she has to wait for them to see what they say next. You come with nothing, you stand on nothing. She does say, the people who broke their promise have displayed a willingness to atone. They've shown their dishonor. No penance, what can be forgotten with time. We will feast on their eternal regret. They will watch their line come to ruin. So they're just being straight up here. This is how they feel right now, that they don't view the cutting off of the top knots as being like enough. That is just a temporary thing that will last a certain amount of time. Their hair will grow back. They'll view themselves as having regained their honor, and that will be it. They want to see a lasting impact from these punishments. So Yangchen's going to have a very hard time negotiating here. She says, Old Iron listened, and look what he received in return, basically. And they say, we are not Old Iron, and they're screaming this at her. We do not love, we do not relent. And it says here, they would hurt Yangchen now for offending them, but at least they hadn't disappeared. So she has to take whatever punishment they're going to give her. They don't attack her. They feign like they're about to, but they stop just before her face. But what they do is they do this sort of like a fang or heibai thing, where it's like a tendril into the forehead, right at the point of her arrow. so the insight chakra, and they show her a vision. This is super, super interesting here. The pain did not take the form she expected. Instead of suffering, she saw. She saw wandering shadows, threaded in a weft of agony, human beings staggering in base groaning lowness, wounds all of them self-inflicted, spilling from lips and ravaging lungs, like burning, choking chime. They cried out to the mist. There was no answer, no substance for an echo to bounce off. So Yangchen is like, well, what am I seeing here? But then she realizes this was different. With the help of a powerful spirit, she had been granted a different person's perspective for once. Jetson's. And I'll just go through the next bit here because it gives context for this. And Yangchen is like, let her go, let her go. And they say, we do not have her. Nothing has her. Nothingness has her. Do you like your gift? It is what she sees and will see forever. And Yangchen's like, it was an illusion. It has to be. Jetson was dead. Yangchen had been there when her heart stopped beating. And then we move on with the negotiation after this. But still, the Phoenix Eels show Yangchen a vision of what Jetson in the spirit world is seeing. So it basically is confirming to us that something happened to Jetson where her spirit was taken captive while she was in the spirit world. Her body died. Yangchen witnessed Jetson's body die. And she is now seeing Jetson in the spirit world around other people, other spirits there, suffering. Where have we seen this before? This is, I think, very clearly the fog of lost souls. They're not saying that's what it is here, but that feels like what it has to be. Like the word mist was used there. If you've seen the Fog of Lost Souls, that's what it looks like to a degree. So that makes sense. That she was. I don't want to spoil it, the Jetson, how this happened, which happens later on in the book, but something happened to Jetson where she was trapped, meaning she was like sort of captured in the spirit world. And when we've seen that happen, that's been the Fog of Lost Souls. So, interesting. That's fascinating. That, I suppose for Yangchen at this point, this is her kind of realizing that, whoa, like part of Jetson is sort of still alive. And it's kind of one of those things where she's maybe known this already, but this is the first time she's directly sort of seen, and it's given her hope in some way. But it's also brought up that despair again of losing someone so close, that this is a punishment from these spirits to her, even though, like they say, it's a gift in that it gives a slight bit of hope, but it also brings back so many bad memories. So interesting, because the spirits are also obviously partially dark. They're on their way to going dark. So this is where she realizes like what has to happen here. She says that, wait, the children of the Sawan, they're not punishment enough. And the spirits are like, like, you're finally talking our language. Like, we thought we did something quite extreme here with basically putting the children to sleep and they're destined to die. You're saying that's not punishment enough. And so she explains, let the children sleep to death and their parents' grief will burn out in a lifetime. There are other better ways to exact a toll, a lasting toll. And they're like, let us talk about inflicting pain, little egg, together. So Yangchen realizes that what she has to do is assist these spirits with coming up with not parts of a deal, but punishments, effectively, for the Sawan clan. Things that will last enough time to satisfy the spirits. And she has to use the knowledge that she has of the clan, their customs, to help the eels come up with this. And this is what she has to do in this situation because they broke those initial, more reasonable deals. And so we'll get to that in a second. There's a quick little paragraph here just highlighting that Yangchen basically goes from the more spirit viney section back into the more physical world section, grabs her glider and makes her way back to the mansion to meet with Lohai, the cousin of the Duke of the clan. So she does note, how long have I been gone? And it's just noted that like, I was only gone like a day. Good. Like, she's heard of incidents of like someone having like a spiritual meeting and encounter and being gone for like potentially months at a time. So she's lost a day, so it's put her like 3 days behind schedule, in that by the time she gets back to Kavik, it'll be like 3 days since she was meant to meet up with him. So she explains the situation. The children will be released from their illness provided more conditions are met. And he seems really happy. He's like, I'm glad they accepted this sacrifice, you know. It's a devastating blow to our clan's honor, but in time we will put this in pleasantness. And she just cuts in and is just like, you may not regrow your hair for 50 years. And he's like, 50 years? What? And she's like, yeah, 500 moons. That's how long the spirits of your island declared you must hold your dishonor. You do not get to reset the scales after a single act of penance. And there's more. So some of the other convinces, others would be a serious hit to their coffers or quirks of behavior that would most certainly exclude them from rituals and celebrations of power in the Fire Nation. So obviously Yangchen like instructed the eels in a way where like, okay, if you force them to have to do this, then they can't participate in this festival, which will make them look terrible with the other clans. And the effective idea here is that this is the event that brings the Sawan clan from being one of the top ones at this point down low. Which is why when we get to Kyoshi and we have like Lady Huazo in charge, and it's noted that Lady Huazo has brought the clan back up to a high point like they used to be. This highlights and explains why they were in a low point before that. That, sure, the 50 years of dishonor, but then that affected things after that. They could then begin to do more things after that ended, but it still had an impact as they had to regrow and get their way back up. Again, without knowing how long Yangchen lived, it's hard to say how big of a gap there is, but it's not as big as you think, because Karuk, even though there's an avatar between Yangchen and Kyoshi, Karuk only lived to be 33. So if we say Yangchen lived to be like 80 or 90, we're only talking about like 150-ish years between now and what we encounter in the Shadow of Kyoshi. And it seems like, that's a nice cycle of like, to go from high to low to high again. So it's interesting, the connection there, that it does in generations going forward improve, but it affects this generation, the generation that broke the deal. It affects them for their entire life. So that's interesting. And you can see Lohai here is very affected by this. We'll be humiliated for generations. We'll never be able to attend at court. Our rivals will dance on our heads. You were supposed to fix this. You can't do this to us. And he takes a step forward in a sort of threatening way. It's not implied that he's like going to like attack her, but I suppose from her perspective, she's like the idea is, I think most of them are firebenders at the heads of the clans. And so she's just like, column of air, hold him in place in the ground, and just, sets things right. I have done nothing to you. We arrived here through your clan's actions. You were in control the whole time. You can undo the bargain in an instant. Simply violate the boundary again. Let me know what form a twice betrayed spirit takes. And he gets up, apologizes, and he's just kind of like, the Sawan will be diminished because of this. But she says, but the next generation will live. With enough time, they might flourish. Is that not worth it? And so she does say, she adds in a Zito quote here, you have lost the melon, hang on to the sesame, no? And this gets him going again. This Zito quote, the respected Zito quote, seems to remind him of like, okay, I'll tell them, it'll be tough, but we can maybe get through this. And she's just kind of like, okay, I guess that's how I use Zito correctly, just little pearls of wisdom and so on. That makes sense. And it's effectively what Yangchen just said, but I suppose her saying that like this was a Zito quote is like it was really what got through to him. But like, I suppose it's just that idea of like, it's effectively the Heibai thing, isn't it? It's the idea of like the forest has been burned down, but you have the acorn, like you have the seeds for it to grow again. And that's the idea of you'll be low, but you're still there. The next generation will build it back up, is what she's saying to him. So at this point, she kind of heads off, and as she gets back to Nujian, she notices that there is there's a letter there, and it says, "Greetings, Avatar, Chaisi here," and Yangchen's like, "What?" Because she knows like Chaisi's manipulating her, like she's here because of Chaisi like delivering that letter to her, basically, and this is what it says. "Given our new partnership in charity, I'm hoping we can be less formal with each other. By now, you will have either solved the Sauwan's spiritual problems or let them drink fully of the bitterness they concocted for themselves." If you're wondering how I know the full story, well, it's amazing what you can learn about someone if you hold their debts. So, I would wager you found a perfect solution, Avatar, because I believe in you, and I am not alone in that faith. Why, the other day I met a boy from Bin-Ur, seeking employment from me. He believed in you a great deal as well, right up to the very end of our conversation. And Yangchen's just like, Kavik, he's in trouble. And she's like, "I told you once that I could teach you how to deal with spies. The first step is catching them. Do you know the best way to catch a spy, Avatar? You open your door and let them in." So you end the chapter with this idea that Chaisi has full-on played Yangchen here. Sent her away. We know Kavik has actually gone ahead with getting into Chaisi's employ. And now she's effectively saying, "I've got him," or "I've taken him out," and has really spooked Yangchen here with this. And Yangchen already not in a great mood after what's just happened, having to deal with these people who have broken the deal, then deal with angry spirits, and now potentially find out that this new friend that she has maybe just been killed. Really, really intense moment here. This definitely has feels of some of the stuff that happens towards the end of Shadow of Kyoshi, like how played Kyoshi gets in parts of that book. So really, really strong chapter here, I think, start to finish. Lots of great stuff here. I always like the chapters involving the spirits because getting more characterization, especially on the ones who can actually speak, is good. To just really clarify that they are a different type of being, and that it is like purposeful in many ways, that a lot of them are not in any way reasonable. Like they even say that like we don't love, highlighting that Old Iron, who seemed like a very stubborn and unreasonable spirit, ultimately agreed and did some of what he did out of love for Lady Tianhai to a certain degree. So that's an interesting one just by itself, that's there. But that in their anger, we get the idea that just a broken deal is a broken deal to them. And the only thing that they're going to do is make an even stricter deal, and you still have to be punished for that deal being broken in the first place. So, interesting. In terms of the connection of like the Phoenix Eels, the bit from the Shadow of Kyoshi about this is obviously in the Karuk flashback, and we just get this idea. A bad dream during a visit to the Fire Nation showed him a rift in a cenote supplying sacred water to a corner of Ma'inka Island. He ran to the caverns in the middle of the night and dove into the water, defiling it. Instead of dashing his head against the stone bottom, he swam and swam straight down until he found a mass of writhing beaks, snapping and licking their ways to the surface. He stabbed with ice and he stabbed with stone. His eyes closed, the screams of terror his own. His former hunting partners of his youth would have scorned him for not performing a clean kill. He could not look upon the dying thing. And he has to drag himself out. And it's after this incident is where Karuk meets Nyatha. But still, there's the moment where, like, this deal obviously eventually gets broken over time. Even this secondary deal gets broken again, and Karuk is left to deal with the aftermath of it. And of course, he doesn't have the skills to deal with it. And there's also the idea here is that you are not going to be able to negotiate with a spirit who's been betrayed twice. That's the interesting point here. They directly say it, that everyone realizes how bad it would be to try and deal with a twice betrayed spirit, but Karuk has to deal with that very thing. I guess the idea of like Yangchen dealt with it when it was a light spirit, when it was partially dark, but Karuk had to deal with this spirit when it was full on dark, and his only option was to kill it. So interesting stuff, of course, because the Karuk stuff from the Shadow of Kyoshi was some of the best parts of that book. But yeah, this is a really, really strong chapter. It's a fun like 2-chapter side plot that has a lot to it, because let's not forget that in this chapter we also effectively get most of the Jetson backstory stuff, and what a reveal that she theoretically is in the Fog of Lost Souls, a thing that both, you know, upsets Yangchen but also gives her some level of hope to be like, so she is somewhere in the spirit world. And it makes you ask so many questions. But we'll have more of the Jetson discussion when we get to the proper flashback explaining what exactly happened to her. And yeah, the Sauron clan history covered here. And it feels like we have a much greater understanding with this, plus what we learned in Shadow of Kyoshi. So, very strong chapter here. And we're going to get straight back into the main plot with the next chapter. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this one. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.